Welcome to the Surrogate's Corner.
Hello and welcome to the Surrogate's Corner with James Mahan. James passionately advocates for surrogates, providing practical legal guidance to surrogates and donors throughout their journeys. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Egg Donation versus Surrogacy Arrangements, Understanding the Legal Differences. James, so good to see you again.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be back with you.
So what are the unique legal considerations for egg donation arrangements?
So the big thing to keep in mind that's different from a surrogacy arrangement with egg donation is that the egg donation process is much faster, but has a much longer time frame. Whereas a surrogacy journey takes longer to do initially, but once it's done, it's kind of done. So one thing we have to consider with egg donation is, one, the future children born from that donation are hopefully going to be born and grow up and get older, and they may want to know about their genetic backgrounds. They may want to be able to communicate or contact their donor. We want the parents of those children to be able to find out medical information from their donors. So there's a lot more on the tail end of an egg donation arrangement about what that future communication will look like. How is it supposed to play out? Who can communicate with whom? And if we have an independent or an anonymous journey versus a kind of known or fully known contract, it changes like what information they actually have about each other at the beginning. So there's a lot of kind of futuristic stuff that we deal with in egg donation that we don't usually have to worry about with the surrogacy journey, because once the baby's born in surrogacy, the most part of that process is kind of done, short of, friendly communication back and forth.
Okay. And how is the legal process different for egg donors compared to surrogates when it comes to their contracts with intended parents, if at all?
The biggest thing is that there's a big push in the industry to kind of move away from anonymous contracts in egg donation or sperm donation. And the reason for that is that the legal and the kind of technological reality is that there really aren't anonymous arrangements anymore. With social media and with genetic screening and kind of testing we can do, your 23andMe's and these other ones out there, there really isn't the ability for people to kind of have, oh, I gave my egg or I provided my sperm, and then I'm sort of anonymous to any future children for a long period of time. So that part is kind of still out there. We still do see anonymous arrangements versus kind of fully known or known arrangements. The preference for most providers and agencies is kind of moving in the direction of known arrangements, but we still deal with both. So one of the big things can be, you may have a donor that you only know by a first name or a donor ID number or something else. You may not know their actual name, their contact information. You kind of work off of a profile. So pictures, demographic information, maybe some medical and genetic history. But, it's kind of one of those things where you may pick someone from a database or from an egg bank pool or whatever else that you're looking at, but the ability to know or interact with that person can be kind of at arm's length if we have an anonymous arrangement versus a fully known arrangement. So that at the very beginning is usually way different than our surrogacy journeys, where everybody knows each other when we're doing a surrogacy journey.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, obviously with a surrogate, you're going to maybe even be a friend or something, but you at least can meet the person and know a little bit more about them.
Right. And sometimes they're there for appointments. They might be there. Hopefully they're there for the delivery. They're meeting in the hospital afterwards. So there's not this kind of preconceived notion that there is not going to be any contact, where in a lot of our anonymous arrangements, there kind of is this, we agree not to communicate with each other unless there's a really specific reason why we need to. Mm-hmm. And that's the other part that kind of comes into an egg donation arrangement is, once, like I said, it's a shorter time frame. The egg retrieval is done and the donor's kind of out of the picture. Now it's to the recipients or the intended parents to create embryos, carry the baby themselves, have a surrogate carry for them. But there's this kind of 18-year time period of what if a child now wants to meet the donor, or they want to have their genetic information and they want to know kind of their history? That is something that we're seeing a lot of rising entities and groups trying to facilitate that and to kind of be there for the donor conceived population that's growing out there. And that is something we try to take into account for our contracts, such as what provisions do we need, what kind of future communication can there be, how will we reach each other if we need to. So a lot of that is just kind of things that the donor wants to think about as they enter in these arrangements. Because like I said, even if you're in an anonymous arrangement, the reality of it, or the likelihood of it staying anonymous, is pretty slim.
What are some of the other specific things a prospective egg donor should think about when they're considering whether they want to become one?
One of the big things is, again, just that kind of lifelong commitment. I think that in prior generations, when my family or my parents started doing this on the legal field in the 90s, there was this anonymity that you could kind of bank on. And sperm banks were more prevalent back then. pick a sperm donor from a profile, babies are born, but like there's really not a lot of future connection. We still have sperm donation. There are still sperm banks. Egg donors it's a much more invasive process to do an egg donation. So there's just the medical risk of doing it, which is, a real and rational risk to think about whether that makes sense for them. There's a lot more medications that we do, and there are medications that we do for egg donation that you don't have to do for sperm donation. And so there's kind of this medical idea of just getting through the process to go ahead and complete that. Then you run into, and this is one way that donation and egg donation or sperm donation and surrogacy is very, very different. I love both. So my firm pretty much only works with either donors or surrogates, but surrogates get to, create life, but the donors are the ones who allow for that life to be possible. And that's amazing and awesome, but it kind of carries with it this idea that you are allowing a part of you to grow and become a child and become an adult and kind of be out there in the world. And you need to be prepared for the idea that, you may be a 22, 23-year-old donor, and all of a sudden you're now 40, and that kid that was born is 18, and they want to come say hi. That is just a reality that we deal with. And I think that agencies and clinics and everybody else is kind of coaching donors that is a likely possibility. It's becoming more and more common and accepted. But that is definitely something that you want to be thinking about. Am I going to be comfortable with the idea that I may have some or multiple children who are out there who will find me in the future? And you don't have to play mom or dad with that particular person, but they may want to know about you or know about their genetic grandparents or other people in your family tree. And that's just kind of a longer term duration commitment to think about, not just I can do the egg retrieval and I'm in a day and be done.
Yeah, it's a long process. The egg donor. I mean, not that a surrogacy isn't, but the egg donating process is. My wife was actually an egg donor. I administered shots, and we had to go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever it was, and talk. She asked me questions about stuff to make sure I was okay. And so there's definitely it's a process. It's not a simple, oh yeah, sure, you can have my eggs. It's not like
right,
that.
and that's kind of the one big difference. I mean, so surrogates generally, women, certain age groups who are love being pregnant, do it well. Pregnancy comes easy to them, and they do a fantastic service. They are amazing people for what they do. But an egg donor, there's a lot more in the psychological feel of not just are you going to carry a baby and give it up, which has its own kind of psychological questions and concerns there, but are you okay with, like I said, a part of you going out there and being a person in the world who's going to continue to grow up and learn and kind of do whatever they want to do? That is something that's a little bit harder for people to think about. In the typical donor is 20, sometimes between 18 and 24, 28, sometimes a little bit older, but in that sub 35 range for being a donor. Are you ready for that possibility to be out there 20 years later? And the other kind of semi-tricky thing is that, we can freeze eggs and we can freeze embryos. So you may provide your eggs to someone today. They may not use them for 10 years, but eventually then use them again. So there's just a whole life duration that you have to think about when you're doing an egg donation, or realistically, even a sperm donation that was not as common of a concern 15, 20, 30 years ago.
What do you think changed there? Why is it more common now for the donors to be contacted? Is it just technology? Is it just the way?
I think it's both. I mean, one, it's technology because the means to do it are out there and easily accessible almost to anybody. I mean, you can order a 23andMe test, do a cheek swab, and all of a sudden find out who you're connected to across the world. Ancestry.com has all this stuff. And so there's this idea that people, one, want to have more information about who they are, where they came from, who else was kind of in their background. And the ability to find that out has definitely increased. The other part of it, I think, is just the medical reality of these are people that are going to be born, and they may have medical concerns that they want to know. I mean, it's one thing if you have your own child and you're kind of raising them and they have a concern at 16 and the doctor says, well, is there anything in your family I should know about? It's a lot harder if that's a donor conceived person and they start saying, I don't know. And we saw this a lot in the European countries. Most of the European countries have actually gone away from anonymous arrangements. They don't like them at all. They want there to be almost a statutory right for a donor conceived person to know, and at least to know the identity of and have medical information about their donor, so they kind of have that grounding for them in the real world. And that's starting to be visible or creep into what we're seeing in the United States. I mean, we still have anonymous banks, we still see anonymous arrangements, but in the industry, there's definitely kind of this push of let's not pretend that anonymity is really going to be, possible for these people? And also, do we really think it's a good idea anyway? There's a handful of like really good resources out there for people who are donor conceived. There's like We Are Donor Conceived is an awesome group. Another one is the Donor Conceived Community. And it's all about, if you are donor conceived and you are going through things about what it means and how does this change how you view yourself and your parental relationships and other kind of things, that is just kind of like the mental health, crisis and epidemic that we've had. People know it's out there. People know that they can ask for help, and help's being given. And that's a great thing. But it just still also, is kind of in the middle of that germination of becoming kind of a fully fledged standard in the industry. And there's still a lot of variations that can exist.
Yeah. How does surrogacy laws vary in terms of parental rights when using donor eggs or donor sperm?
This is a great question, because a lot of times we have donors who are then, will turn into a surrogacy arrangement. So whether a single mom wants to use a sperm donor to have a kid and carry on her own, or, a same-sex male couple needs an egg donor to have a baby together. Once we start getting into parental rights, the presumption in most laws has been that when like a married couple has a child, that both parents are going to be, parents, biological or not. When we have egg donors and sperm donors, it gets a little bit trickier, because now there's a genetic gap between someone who's going to be a parent and not. Where we mostly see this come into play a lot of times is, for same-sex female couples, actually, which is not the common group that people think of. But if one of them uses a sperm donor and carries the baby, the other mother is oftentimes in a limbo status depending on what state the baby's born in and everything else. There are a number of states that will only put a biological parent on the initial birth certificate, male or female, regardless of whether it's sperm or eggs that were used. And then the non-biological parent has to do either a step parent or second parent adoption to kind of get themselves added as a co-equal parent to the child. That's not in every state. In most of the new states that are coming up with surrogacy laws, they kind of do away with that at the beginning. But the other thing that people remember is that surrogacy laws are relatively uncommon across the US. I mean, most states allow surrogacy and are friendly towards it. Not a whole lot have surrogacy statutes. The ones that do oftentimes will say, we don't care where the genetic, gametes come from. When the person engages with a surrogate to have a baby, they're the parent. And if there's two of them, they're both parents and they're equal parents. But that's not true in every state. And that's one thing that some of the agencies and stuff try to coach their potential intended parents on, as to what will this look like and what steps may you have to do post-delivery to make sure that both parents, if there are two, are going to be treated equally on that birth certificate and in that parental rights category.
Is the egg donation contract part of the surrogacy legal process? And if so, what should intended parents or donors know before proceeding with their donation or surrogacy journey?
Yeah, so a lot of times they're not, we need to know kind of where the gametes come from. So usually in our surrogacy contracts, it will talk about the gametes, the sperm and eggs, do not belong to the carrier or her spouse or husband or whatever else. We like that because we want to make sure there's a distinction between a genetic arrangement and a gestational arrangement. So that's one kind of clear difference that we have. But a lot of the courts want to know, okay, well, great. Do these people who are using donated eggs or sperm have the right to use them? And that's where we kind of use the donation contract to say, yes, this person not only has the material, but they have the legal right to it. So it's not uncommon for us to have to submit, when we do a court process in the surrogacy journey, both the gestational carrier contract between the parents and the surrogate, but also the donation contract between the parents or the recipient and the donor, to kind of provide that paper trail as to where everything came from. So it's not that it's kind of a definite stopgap for there not being the ability to do a surrogacy journey if you don't have your donation contract, but it's becoming more and more common for courts and judges to say, can I also see the donation contract when we have donated eggs or sperm or embryos as part of that journey?
Okay. And where is the egg and sperm donation industry heading, in your opinion? Are there ethical or legal challenges that are coming on the horizon?
So I think the biggest one is that we're starting to see this kind of, again, push towards only doing known or semi-known arrangements, to doing things where the ability for donor conceived people and their future connection to a donor or access to medical information. One of the other things that we're seeing a lot are these third-party kind of portal groups that are opening up to link recipients or intended parents and their donors. A lot of times people are matched through an agency or an egg bank, which are great, But if that agency or egg bank goes away or stops functioning, it's kind of like, well, who does the connection now between these people who are engaging in a 18, 25-year kind of relationship realistically? And some that are out there, donor sibling registry has been around for a while. EDC Nexus is another big one that just allows for donors and intended parents, whether they're doing an anonymous or a known donation arrangement, to have this kind of outside link to each other so they can update their profiles. They can tell us if they learn new medical information about them. Because again, most donors are sub 30, under 30. They may find out something at 45 they had no idea about at 25.
Right.
Well, the genetic offspring would probably still like to know that. And these kind of portals allow them to share that information, which again, I think is better for everybody, but it just definitely puts in this idea that you're entering into an arrangement where you may, things 20 years later may pop up that you have an obligation to share with somebody else. And we want to make sure that access is out there for them to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Are there measures being taken to deal with the common challenges and issues?
So I mean, some of those items that are out there for connection are a big part of it. Statutorily, some states, so like Colorado, is moving away from allowing or wanting anonymous arrangements to happen within the state of Colorado. They're pushing everyone to go to known arrangements or to have consent from a donor to be contacted by a child born from the donation. Even a lot of the ones like in the California codes is saying, if you collect sperm or eggs that are donated, you need to make sure that you're getting medical and contact information from the donors, and also getting consent, yes or no, for them to be contacted by either a child in the future or the parents of the child in the future. And then also, if they say no, the ability to be reached out to and asked, like, are you sure you don't want to change your mind? So there's just this overall push to realizing anonymity is fading away. And also the importance of knowing who, the genetic contributors are, what that means for this, hopeful life that's kind of going to come into fray, and to be able to make sure that person has access to the basic information that most of us take for granted, because we just look at our parents and be like, oh, like I kind of know what I'm dealing with, as opposed to I love my parents, but they're not my genetic contributors, and I may be missing a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's something I don't know that people would think about. I recently had a physical, and the doctor asked me about my parents and my siblings, and it's something I guess we don't think about in terms of the anonymity of the donation process. Like, you think about it as like, oh, well, someone would want to know who their parents are, but you don't necessarily think that you don't consider the fact that someone might need to know that kind of stuff for medical reasons.
Right. And that's where the European push kind of came from, was not only do we think that people are better off sort of knowing where they came from or having a picture or an identity to say, oh, well, at least I have some kind of physical representation of a biological parent. But like you said, that medical reality of, do you have a history of cardiac disease? Do you have a history of Alzheimer's? Do you have a history of cancer? If you're drawing blanks or have question marks for all those, that kind of leaves that person in a very unfamiliar, ungrounded reality that we're trying to move away from. And I think that's sort of where the industry is headed, in a good way, but it just kind of is slowly getting there, because we're kind of in a somewhat unregulated system that takes a while to kind of reach that critical mass and momentum to get us there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Surrogates Corner with James Mahan. To connect with James, please visit surrogatescorner.com and like and subscribe to our channel if you can, and leave us a review as well. James, always great to see you. So glad to have you here.
Thanks, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.